We're here to have a chat with Cooper Smout, who is founder of the Free Our Knowledge platform, which enables community-driven collective action in the scientific community. Good to see you guys here. My name's Kelly. I am a postdoc at the University of Queensland and have been enjoying heaps of the awesome Open Science Room activities over the past couple of weeks. If anyone has any questions during this chat, please feel free to put something in the chat and I can field the questions to Cooper. But Cooper, let's get started.
Cool. Nice to see you, Kelly. How you doing?
Likewise. I'm good. Thank you. I made it here in plenty of time.
Nailing
So you're going to share some slides about the project, or should we?
Yeah, I guess I thought I would start with kind of how I got into this project in the first place, like what got me interested in it.
Yeah, so it was, if I remember rightly, when you came to your first experience of publishing a paper that you started to detect there might be some issues in this system we call science.
That is one way to put it, yeah. So my first experience was interesting. My first paper was bounced between 5 journals before it found a home. And in that process, I think it went out for 2 or 3 rounds of reviews and subsequent rejections before finally being accepted. And I mean, part of that was because I started at the top of the tier, like ridiculously high for what the paper was, but I was like an idealistic honors student, basically thinking, yeah, this is the best thing in the world.
I think it's good to, I'm really proud of having failed to get into some top tier journals. Like, I started my landslide high.
You have an incredible pseudo resume.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My resume of failures is amazing.
but that's my understanding was that this could make or break my career. And so if I happen to be lucky enough and get into one of those journals, then why not try for it? Like, there's very little cost on the author side for submitting to multiple journals, but there's a massive cost on the reviewer and editor side because you have to re-review articles that have already been processed. And so the first thing I learned out about that process is just that, like, how inefficient is it? Like, why are we doing it like that? It just seems like the slowest, most inefficient waste of time and resources that you can imagine.
Actually, Paula has said it is a tragedy of the commons.
Yeah.
Morning, Paula. Yeah. Just huge comments.
Yeah.
She cites you, Cooper.
Well, I'm definitely citing philosophers there. But so that was the first thing, I guess. That it's just like a waste of everyone's time, and that's the one thing that we really don't have enough of is time. And then the second thing that process taught me was as I went through this sort of hierarchy of journals, a lot of the comments I was getting were saying, we find this interesting and sort of important, but not novel enough, not sexy enough, as I interpreted it. And at the same time, it was like a completely new paradigm that, like, the technique had only been developed and written about once before. We'd taken that technique and applied it to a new area, asking completely novel questions. But because that kind of vague question had been asked before and shown in different ways, they were like, no, this isn't sexy enough for us.
Is this the paper you got published in PLOS Biology in the end?
No. This was
the
Journal of Cognitive Neuroscience.
Yeah.
In the end. And so I guess, like, what came out of that is this kind of realization that, through that process, we really honed the story. Like, we changed the kind of pitch to make it sound more novel, or like really hone in on the novel aspects. But at the same time, like, the content was always the same. Nothing changed except for this packaging that we put on the product. And it was crazy to me that, like, the packaging of a product changes the intrinsic value of the product. Like, it's still the same product, whether you put it in this, like, pretty fancy packaging or not. And so that was the second thing I learned. And then I guess the third thing I learned was that, especially in our field, like we have this garden of forking paths in any analysis pipeline. And
by our field, you mean cognitive neuroscience?
Sorry, yeah, I was speaking to the OHBM crowd here.
Yeah.
True, yeah. Like, so should explain we're both in cognitive neuroscience, and when you run an analysis, like you've got, you know, something between 10, 20 different steps that you might move through, each of which has a number of different decisions to make. And so when you crunch the numbers, you get to like this exponential explosion of possible analyses. Yeah. Some of which are going to produce significant results, and some of which are not. And to me, it just seemed insane that I was going to be rewarded according to the sort of hierarchy of the journal that I got in, purely dependent on the story that I told. And if I have like thousands of different analysis options that I can pick from, then you're creating a very clear contradiction between scientific ideals and like doing the right thing and reporting everything that you've done, and the reality of the publishing industry, which is that they don't want to hear everything that you've done. They like, I literally, I went through this discussion with my supervisor. I was like, can I just say all of the things that I did? And it's like, the journal won't accept it like that. They want a clear story that just says, this is what we did, boom, 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 and no fluff, no confusing aspects. And so I guess those three things just like really shocked me. I was like bright-eyed and thinking that the scientific system would be pretty optimal, I guess.
Yeah.
It kind of sent me into a bit of a tailspin.
Supposed to be self-correcting, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Actually, I think both Sin and Paula have made some really good comments here about, so Sin was saying that it's true in any field, for better or for worse. It's not just a cognitive neuroscience. And I can definitely empathize with that, given, because I guess we span experimental psychology as well as cognitive neuroscience. And I can definitely think of journals where I'm pretty sure a prerequisite to get in is to put the word novel in your abstract, regardless of whether or not it's actually novel or not. And Paula's made the point that it's shocking to see, she found it shocking to see the poor quality of reviews. So the lack of transparency and consistency. Amen, Paula. Like, I completely agree with that point. And the other thing I think I found shocking is that we have gatekeepers who are busy editors, who don't necessarily have the time to check the consistency of the reviews, or perhaps the ego-driven nature of the reviews sometimes. And so we have multiple gatekeepers with lack of time or invested interest. So you're welcome, Salah. So there's lots of, I guess, barriers we get to publishing something that we're aiming to be objective with in our daily life.
Yeah, and I think that's the word, objective. That's what I found so striking about this whole realization, is that how unobjective the publishing process was, given that we're a bunch of scientists trying to be objective here. Like, you would think there'd be some kind of objective process that we went through. And so those realizations sent me into a bit of a deep dive on the publishing industry. And this is where I suppose I can bring up some slides, but I basically research.
Yeah, give us an overview. I think I've seen you give really beautiful overviews before of how the industry has grown and changed.
Yeah, this was really surprising, and I guess I forget quite often that people don't know this stuff, because I've sort of been looking into it for a few years. But did that come up? Yeah, I can see it. Can you see mine?
I can see yours.
Can you see that okay? Yeah, great. Thanks, Tom. So
just to clarify something, Tyler's asking, what is the platform going to be about Aperture? I'm not fully sure what is meant by that. Is that?
I think probably we'll give like an overview of where the ideas have come from, and because I think this is really important background, that a lot of people do not understand how and why we've got to where we are, and actually how recent the phenomenon it is. And then we'll get to the platform towards the end. But Thank you, Paula.
Awesome.
We'll come to that. So this is my super brief history of scholarly publishing. The first journal was published in, well, actually, there were 2 journals published in 1665. And since then...
So this is like when there was 20 scientists, right?
Yeah. So they formed
in the world,
and they were like, yeah, let's make a journal. So they did. And that was kind of the birth of journals. And pretty much journals have stayed the same format since then, except for the addition of peer review in the mid-18th century there. Can you see my cursor there if I'm doing this?
Yes.
Great,
yep.
Cool. I'll stay on the screen. Then in the mid-20th century, basically some commercial companies realized the potential for this field to make a heap of money. And there's a really great article on this in The Guardian, which I can probably link in the comments. If anyone
that'd be cool.
I could post it because I might just stay on this slide here. But it's basically it's something like is the publishing model staggeringly profitable publishing model damaging to science? And I think the answer is yes. But that article goes into Robert Maxwell, who founded this publishing company called Pergamon Press, and from that point I
was starting to get mad at Mr. Pergamon, but I'll have to refocus my fire.
I can't remember where that name comes from. But basically he began like this rapid and aggressive expansion of journals into different fields and different countries. And he kind of clicked onto the realization that journals aren't really in competition with one another because they compete for authors, not for readers. And so what he did was effectively just find a new field that didn't have a journal yet, approach someone and be like, hey, do you want to be an editor? And the academic was like, sure, this seems like a prestigious thing to do. And so then he would like create these new journals and push them into different around the world effectively, and like really built this empire, which eventually turned into Elsevier.
Amazing. Actually, so Paula said that she interviewed Robert Maxwell once.
Wow, that's amazing.
Did you get any insights into like his mindset on the publishing industry? I wonder if you would think you've created a monster or a fine beast. Maybe you can add that to the chat, Paula, if you want to share. Sorry.
I think it's all a matter of perspective, you know, like in business terms, he's not a monster, he's a genius, you know, he's a prodigy. And I think that's the thing, like businesses are born to make money, and he did it very well. He was incredibly successful, and at the same time, we shouldn't downplay the benefits of what he did. Like he brought publishing to much bigger markets and expanded fields, and definitely like worked with scientists in those early days to increase reach, and had a lot of benefit in the days when publishing was necessary. And I mean print publishing was necessary because academics had to print journals and send them around and do all that stuff. So it was super, super necessary and helpful in those days. But yeah, Tom's posted another article. I'll see if I can find it. I had it in my, just 1 second while I pull up the article I was thinking. There we go. Yeah, so basically, so you can see here the next point is in 1974 when Cell was founded. And this really is where I think things started to go haywire. So you can see this is only sort of 50 years ago, really, not even 45 if I'm doing math right. And it was this point when they started, this journal specifically, started to aggressively reject articles. So prior to this point, generally the journals would just accept most things as long as they weren't, you know, complete bunk. But at this point, with this journal, they really started to build a brand, like a sexy, powerful brand. And not long after, academics started to see that journal as the place to publish. And so they were starting to tailor their research to get into this journal, and because they were only interested in the most novel and most impactful work, it meant that academics then started changing their behavior, and it became this kind of self-reinforcing cycle. And so very quickly, like the field realized that this is actually an incredibly powerful way to build a brand, which can then command higher prices when you want to charge libraries to subscribe to your journal. And so this model spread very quickly throughout the field in the 70s. And that was really when our problems began, because if you look down here, you can see this is quite small. Is that big enough? Can people see that?
Yes, I can see it if I move in. So just to check, by serial crisis, do you mean serial as in like a serial magazine?
Yeah, I guess that's what it is. Yeah, it's a more library term, so they use it in libraries to describe. Yeah, it must be like the reference magazine. But basically,
man, I love this figure.
Yeah,
so
I mean, it's a fine line. But here you can see the rate of inflation, pretty steady. And here you can see this exponential trend of journal prices, of subscription prices over a 30-year period. And there's a shocking statistic that I don't have to hand, but it's something like a 270% increase in subscription prices over a 30-year period. And like the real reason for this, the reason that they could do this is because of a couple of factors, I guess. The model was such that academics were forced effectively to hand over their copyright to the journal. And then at the same time, there was this ruling developed called the Inglefinger Rule. And that was adopted first by, I think, the Lancet, one of the very powerful journals. And what that meant is that they decided that they would never publish anything that had been published elsewhere. And this will spread throughout the industry. And effectively what that means is that each journal becomes like a mini monopoly on the content. And so because it's a mini monopoly, it means that it's non-replaceable. It's non-competitive. It's not a functioning market. It means that the library has no option but to subscribe to that journal if they want that content. And if they have become one of these powerful journal brands like Cell or Nature or Science or whatever, then if they don't subscribe, then their researchers that they support are going to scream blue murder at them and demand that they subscribe to it. So it puts the libraries in this impossible bind where they have to just accept these price increases, which have kind of skyrocketed over the last 30 years, and really just put a massive pressure on library budgets, which ultimately could be money that would otherwise go to research funding.
Yeah.
And so then, this is around the time when the internet came in, and there's this really cool Forbes article that said that declared that Elsevier was going to be the first pin to fall. It's going to be the first victim of the internet, because how can they survive in an internet?
The first pin to fall to hyperglobal megacorp. Is that what you mean?
But as a compelling argument, because I mean, the one thing they do is print stuff, and now we've got the internet, we've got the digital age, we don't need them, right? But very craftily, business people, being business people, developed a plan to sort of moderate that. And so what Elsevier did, they were the first to develop this big deal idea. And what that meant was that they packaged all of their journals into one subscription. So instead of subscribing to all of the individual journals, they just say, this is our entire thing, take it or leave it, basically. Not technically, they offered, you could still buy an individual journal, but the prices of individual journals were so expensive that it was just prohibitive at that point anyway. So libraries then basically got locked into subscribing to the entire content of these publishers. And when you're something like controlling 25% of the literature, as Elsevier was at that point, you have very little option but to accept whatever price they demand. And then, of course, from that point, not surprisingly, prices kept getting jacked up. And so that's kind of where we were at when that really was the issues that spawned the open access movement in the early 2000s, which was born in 2002 at a meeting in Budapest. And a big motivator for the open access movement was actually money. Like, we realized that we were throwing away money to these companies, and we wanted to use the internet for its originally intended purpose, which was to share research between researchers.
Yeah. And to pay to put color figures on there, right? It's
very expensive to put different pixels into a computer. You know that.
Oh, we have a question. Do the journals justify the price inflation in any meaningful way themselves, particularly in light of the decreased costs of printing because of online distribution?
I mean, they attempt to. I mean, if you talk to the PR department of Elsevier, then I'm sure they'll give you some reason. Like often what's spouted is that researchers are choosing to publish here, and so therefore it's like a free market. But there's not much choice in this system. I don't know if I'm actually answering.
Well, so I guess then what do they claim their costs are that they have to charge so much to libraries?
Well, there are fees. I mean, there are charges and there are costs, and we shouldn't downplay those. So there's.
I guess they need good wages. Some bonuses.
Well, so I didn't put these stats here, but again, I can post a link to it. But if we're talking about their motivation, then potentially one of the motivations is to maintain their high profit margins that they've always enjoyed. So just to take an example, in that link that I just posted, Alex Holcomb's done some work on this and shown that basically Elsevier and Springer make profits every year in the region of 35 to 37%. And when you put that in the context of Google and Apple, which are only making 25 and 29% profits, and this is revenue turnover each year, then you realize that scholarly publishing is probably the most profitable industry in the world. And so, and to go back to the question then, like, how do they justify the prices? Well, I don't know that they can. The prices didn't significantly decrease. I mean, look, here's the graph that you can see, and the internet happened right in the middle of there. And I don't see any change in like subscription prices through that period. Like there wasn't a drop to sort of a very brief one, maybe at 1993, where it stagnates. But I mean, they have not accounted for the price of the internet because they didn't have to.
That must be when the colored pixel price stagnated.
They couldn't get enough ink.
So I just want to raise a question from Teal. Hello. So with regards to the start of the open access movement, so he's raised the question, is open access not just changing from reader pays to author pays, while journals can still make unconstrained profits, which I think is a pretty important point to cover with respect to the goals of open, free our knowledge.
Absolutely, yeah, and that's a great point because that's what 2002 was about when this movement was founded. It was about a few things. It was about providing access, and it was about speeding processing and communication, and it was about reducing costs. And you're totally right, Teal. Like what's happened basically since then in the 20 years is that this concept of open access has become corrupted, I think, by these companies because they were very resistant for a very long time and did everything they could, including lobbying in government to kill open access as best they could. That was Elsevier. And so they've resisted for a very long time. And then slowly they've kind of realized, learning from journals like PLOS, that actually they can turn this into a profitable business model. And so now you've got this spate of author pays open access models, which are, as everyone knows, incredibly expensive. I mean, how can it cost $5,000 to publish one article when you're pretty much just putting it up on the internet after a bit of typesetting and other services? And there are studies that show
it better be fancy typesetting. I want some nice flourishes on my characters for that price.
Yeah. And actually, something I should have thought of is I'll post Bjorn's stuff in there, because he's looked at. This probably isn't the best link for him, but if you search his blog, you'll find some analysis on the actual true cost of publishing and what it could be. And effectively, what we have right now is like a 10 times cost of what it could actually be. Thanks, Tom.
Yes, Tom, thank you. Okay, so yeah, I think there are some really important points that we should talk about here in context of the Free Our Knowledge platform as well, in terms of how we move towards a culture of open science publishing that we want to see that would benefit science. So maybe, do you want to introduce the platform, Chris, or what gave you the idea for the platform, perhaps?
Yeah, so I'll skip over the costs. I think probably because we're all tuning into an open science room, we're aware that there are a lot of costs, and probably we're also quite aware, because we've been through it, that there are a lot of personal costs to the current system as well. So we can probably there, but we should. Oh yeah, I love this. So true. But yeah, we shouldn't downplay that this is really taking a personal toll on us. And if we can solve this problem, then I think things get a lot better for us as a community and individuals. So yeah, I can skip over this. I think we just went through open access.
Yeah. So you've tried to publish your first paper. You're really frustrated. You want a better, different future for scientific publishing. So what was the next steps in your journey to your Free Our Knowledge project?
Yeah, so I think I can say on this slide, because I think this speaks to what the next step was. The next step was trying to find out what we could do better. And I guess, so I used to be an architect, and I guess here's my path design training came out, and I just tried to design what I would create as a system. And as many things, turns out it had already been designed 5 years before in various formats. But that kind of brought me to the realization that even if you designed the perfect system, who would be the first person to use it? Through this whole process, I went around to everyone that I knew, which were mostly ECRs, but also supervisors and senior researchers, and asked them what they thought about the publishing industry. And without a fail, everyone said that it had a lot of room to improve. But then the second thing that everyone would say is that, well, you got to play the game, or you've just got to survive, and there's not much we can do about it. But it leads you to this.
What about Immanuel Kant?
What about Immanuel Kant?
The notion that you should behave, the way to behave ethically or morally is to act in the way that you would want everyone else to act, or that you hope other people would act in the same situation. So
yeah, it's a nice philosophy. Yeah. I wish I knew philosophers better that could provide a more practical retort.
Yeah.
That's the thing. When I talked to everyone, they were like, yeah, I would really like to be doing this. And that was part of the thing with researching the open access movement, is that there are already great journals out there. There are fee-free, community-owned open access journals in almost every field, but yet no one's using them. And the question is, why is no one using them? And what I kind of realized is that if we're all wishing that we could do something better, but feeling like we're not powerful enough to do it on our own because we're trapped within this system. If, just to take the extreme example, if all of us just overnight decided we were never going to support this set of journals that aren't helping us or supporting us, and we're only ever going to support these journals, then journals are made and broken on the support that we give them. If we were to boycott a particular journal, overnight it would be worth nothing. Sin's got a great point there, and this has happened. This is so Nature proposed to make a machine learning journal, and at one of the machine learning conferences, they just gathered 3,000 signatures, just like that. Everyone said, no, you won't. We're not going to support it. And it just killed the journal, just like that. It's a great example of the power that we have. We're not beholden to these companies because we are that we are the community that create the value, and without us, they're worth nothing. But to get there, you need that kind of critical mass, like they had in that. Oh wait, was it not nature machine intelligence? You'll have to fill us in which one it was. I probably got my facts wrong.
On the spot facts. Actually, so Ian has asked a question which does, I think, speak to in terms of like where culpability and pressure should be. So he's asking, so he says monopoly in any business is not optimal. Do you think we can use the internet to make these journals compete instead of the authors?
I do. The real trick is that we don't have a functioning marketplace right now. And so really to create that functioning marketplace, which will absolutely drive down prices, we need to do a few things. To me, the main thing is dissociate the evaluation process from the publishing process. Because then you can, and I guess, sorry, I should rephrase. I think the main thing is to get the evaluation process under the control of the academic community, because from submitting to evaluating through peer review, effectively, we, the community, are doing all of that work. It's just that right now it goes through this portal, which is the journal. But really, we're volunteer academics research, peer reviewing each other's research. And if we can get that process under our control, then I don't really mind what happens after that, because journals can come along and provide additional value, and they do currently. They provide value, but
so what value do you think that they are providing, or that they could provide under that?
I mean, there's a lot of functions, and I wish I had it to hand. I posted like a nice article or two on this, but I mean, they offer advertising, curating, typesetting, like they check the ethical compliance. There's a whole list that you can search in. Like Scholarly Kitchen wrote an article on this that list all of the functions that they provide. But the point is that those functions, to be a functioning marketplace and compete between journals or between publishers, would need to be dissociated from the evaluation process, and then they can occur afterwards in more of a kind of curation and package creation process. But yeah, I guess to answer Ayan's question, I think it is possible to have a functioning marketplace, but we need to radically reform the way that we're doing things. And that then gets back to the collective action problem, because who is the first person to support that kind of reform if you don't have a critical mass of people alongside you? I'm conscious that we've only got 20 minutes, so I should probably actually tell people about the platform. Is that okay?
Yeah, so Sin fact-checked your machine learning quotes, and that's in the chat, so thanks, Sin. Appreciate that.
Oh, okay,
cool. Okay, so what are the steps for change?
Yeah, so first I should preface that this is kind of not a new concept. Like, think of any industrial workers' strike. If you were the only person going on strike, you get fired, right? But what you do is you organize everybody, or at least a critical mass of you, to go on strike, and then you're protected amongst each other. And so that's kind of the classic idea of what collective action is. But in a more modern context, we've got these like online platforms like Kickstarter, which is basically a collective action platform for accruing capital. And then there's another one which is very similar to what we're doing here, called CollAction, which stands for collective action. And that's more around social movements. So getting 100,000 people to give up meat on Mondays or whatever. And in doing so, sort of move the herd together as a unit. So really what Free Our Knowledge is trying to do is tailor that idea for the academic community. And so the way it works is that we've built a platform where you can propose a campaign, much like on Kickstarter. So the campaign consists of some behavior that you want your community to adopt. And that might be pre-registering your first study. It might be uploading some data to a repository. It could be supporting some set of journals that you particularly like. It could be publishing open access or publishing a preprint. you name it, any kind of behavior that currently you feel has some kind of a cost attached to it, but that cost would be reduced if everybody was doing it.
Okay.
And so once you've proposed that campaign, then you pitch it to your friends, colleagues, enemies, anyone, and basically get them to sign this pledge. Now, the important point is at this point, there's zero cost to you except for the 1 minute or 3 seconds that it took to sign that pledge, because you're not asked to do anything. So you just become a number in the platform, and you can be anonymous. By default, you'll be anonymized, but you can show your name if you like. But at that point, there's no cost, there's no requirements. You just sit back and wait, or better yet, tell everybody about the campaign because you want it to succeed. And then the third step is, once we build up that critical mass over time and build that community that wants to act together in this action, then when we hit that critical mass, that threshold that we've predetermined, then everybody who's signed that campaign is listed on the website, and we're all directed to carry out the behavior together. And the idea is that at that point, if the critical mass is of a sufficient size, then we can protect ourselves in the actions that we want to take without leaving those that are vulnerable amongst us, like early career researchers, researchers of underrepresented populations, or in third world countries. We can move together without leaving them behind to be sacrificed by the system.
So it sounds like an interesting framework. Why don't we, could we perhaps go through how you've implemented it in terms of, so your campaign is about publishing in open access journals, am I right?
Yeah, so I mean, that was kind of what got me into this. So that was the campaigns that I initially...
So I think let's go through that. And then perhaps if anyone has questions about the mechanisms of the campaign and how it's going to work, then you can just ask those as we go through.
Okay. There's a little box somewhere there. I don't
yes.
know. So you can go to the website yourself if you like, but I will just share it on the screen as well. I'll find the window that I'm in.
There's the figure again.
There's the serial classic. Yeah.
Just to remind us why we're here.
Okay, is that coming up now?
Yes, that looks great.
Great. So yeah, this is the website basically, and it's got a very brief blurb about scholarly publishing, but I should note that I just haven't updated this website for a little bit because I've been busy finishing a PhD. And so it kind of functions like this, like Kickstarter, where you've got a few different campaigns, and each campaign will give you some kind of information about what it's about. So this one here is just asking you to only support journals that let you publish a preprint. Seems pretty simple, but there are still journals that will not let you post a preprint because of that Engelfinger rule, and I just think that's ridiculous. You've done all the work up until that point, so why do they get to say whether you publish your preprint or not?
Yeah, and so by only support, do you mean only publish in, or only subscribe to, or?
Yeah, so these campaigns, these campaigns are very broad thinking and long term, really. So the idea is that you would, from that point when your pledge activates, you would only ever support those journals moving forward. And sorry, you asked what support means. I mean by only reviewing and submitting articles to. So any kind of contact or contributions that you would give to them.
Yeah, I guess actually that could be a reasonable, in terms of, we as a community provide so much free labor to these journals. And even if people felt that it was too difficult to perhaps not publish in these journals for now, even just taking away the reviewing that we would do for them for free could be a useful mechanism for attenuating the hold that they have over the academic industry.
Absolutely.
Community.
And I think, like, in recent years, we've seen how slow peer review has been getting, and that might be some part of it, that people are starting to shift where they provide their services. But at the same time, if you can put on your CV that you reviewed for Nature, then that's going to be a massive win for you moving forward. And so there's still that incentive problem in all of our actions, really, because they're all kind of bound up with one another. So yeah, I mean, I could take you through, I guess the other campaign that I'm more excited about is so I think green open access is like a low bar. Like I can't see any reason why anyone would not be able to sign that.
Yeah.
And I should
and so how long is that list of journals, out of interest?
It
Like,
varies highly by field. So
okay.
and it's larger in it varies highly by field. In our field, you can go to Sherpa Romeo to look that up, which is a really great resource, and you can actually just I'll see if I can type that in.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Okay, just to give a feel of how the platform works. So say, like with this campaign,
Yeah.
so I'm like, that's something I can do. I'll pledge. Then how do you know when there is sufficient critical mass behind?
Yeah, so you can see
the community
pledges here. Now this campaign is kind of under construction a bit. So I kind of went a bit deep on my thinking in this, and rather than just sort of setting a specific number of people to sign up, which I think is probably the simpler way, and definitely some feedback I've had would suggest that it would be easier for people to adopt. But I built this particular campaign using a kind of percentage slider for the percentage of impact in your field. And I don't think I'll go into details on how that's calculated, or I suppose I can. It's just basically calculating the proportion of citations that people had produced over the last 5 years, I think was the window, as a representation of their level of impact. But to be honest, I've since realized that this is just too confusing. It's too big scale. There's a number of changes that I want to make to these campaigns moving forward. There's a lot of lessons I've learned, I guess, over the last year since this was founded. But I should highlight as well that there are features that you can allow people to choose. So whether this pledge will apply only to first author papers, which you tend to have more control over where they go, or if you're kind of, a zealot for this stuff and you run a lab and you demand that everybody publishes the same way you do, then you could select all of your publications for this pledge to apply to. And then, as I said before, you can also decide whether your name becomes public on the website or not, which will then be shown up here in the list of supporters. So we can see we've got a bunch of supporters already who are publicly listed, and then there's more lurking in the backgrounds. And so all of those ones that are lurking would, in theory, get publicized on the website if and when we reach critical mass.
Okay. How about, do you have any, so I remember there is a paper by, I believe, a Swedish sociologist, but if anyone wants to fact check me on this, they are more than welcome, which says that you need for like that critical mass to enact widespread change. It needs to be, I think it's like 10 or 15% of the community.
Ooh, that's cool. I didn't know that. Maybe that could be the threshold.
Yeah, so but you need those people to act. So once you have 10 to 15% of the population like acting according to those values, I believe it's 10 to 15, Paula, but I should probably go fact check myself after this chat and put it back in this room. So yeah, but the thing is you need people to actually ask for it or act upon it. So how do you ensure that in these campaigns? So, it's like you've got, say, 80% of the field sign up and everyone's willing to like boycott nature and science forever.
Yeah.
And then, ta-da, it's the day.
Yeah.
How do we make sure that we retain our behaviors according to our pledge?
Yeah, so I guess, one response would be to say that if someone's gone and signed a pledge to say they want to do this thing when they reach critical mass, personally, I feel like most people are going to go through with that. It's kind of like on Kickstarter, you don't see high rates of people pulling out because they're getting a benefit out of it. Like in Kickstarter, they're getting a product for a really great price. Here, we're getting to do the things that we want to do anyway, but don't feel that we can. So there is an intrinsic value in being able to act on that pledge. But you're right, there's no way that this platform itself can enforce any kind of behavior. The only way that something like that could occur is if we were to partner with funders and institutions, and then there would be some kind of a top-down pressure to carry through with pledges. But one thing we could do is just basically publicize, because we'll have a list of people who have made the pledge, then we can sort of have a cross-check using the various databases out there to show who has actually followed through with it. And possibly that sort of level of visibility would be enough to motivate people. But I guess
I also feel like it would only need to work for one campaign, right? Like if you had critical mass, a bunch of people did shift, and the community managed to devalue one set of powerful journals, that should be sufficient.
Sufficient to? For
the rest of the publishing industry to see that the changes have to be made and that their model is no longer viable in the community.
Oh yeah, it's a strong signal. I mean, like if and when we have that first success as a campaign, then I think it kind of shows that this is a thing now, and that these are the parameters that this community want. And it also then acts as a signal to fellow researchers, like, oh, look, there's this thing that I hadn't heard about, but they've just reached 1,000 people have signed this campaign. And then you can build on that campaign to build a bigger campaign. So your next target is, I don't know, 5,000, 10,000 or whatever. And you just keep scaling up until you get to the point with everybody. And it can really snowball like that, I think. But
I think Paula's made a really good point, actually, that would be good to just chat about. So you mentioned that it's a matter of providing a suitable alternative publishing process, which is truly open and transparent, which I agree with. And I think there are plenty of ideas in the community about what the new model could be. Have you thought about how free our knowledge could perhaps work in a cyclical nature with this, like feeding back to the publishing structures that we have and enabling action to actually change the structure of the publishing industry itself? Yeah,
so I mean, that is a really great point. Like, we need viable alternatives, and so that's kind of what this campaign here was about, which is platinum open access, otherwise known as fee-free open access, and really is actually just the original intention of the open access movement, which is zero cost and 100% access to information. And like I was saying earlier, there are a bunch of journals that already uphold these principles, like of being free for authors to publish and free for readers to read. And in our field, what a really exciting development is called it's called Neurons Behavior Data Analysis. And I know we've talked about this, but it is, I can go there because I'm on my browser now. It is a fully open access, effectively fee-free journal. So they have like a $10 fee, which is just going towards paying for the DOI registration. And they have an absolutely killer editorial board. Like if you look through here, this is founded by Anne Churchland in conjunction with this awesome editorial board. And look at this editorial board. Like they are just ready and waiting, basically.
I'm very intimidated by this editorial board. They're amazing.
It's amazing. Really broad reaching across like a whole bunch of different neuroscience-based and behavior-based disciplines. So they have a really broad gamut, and they're ready for our submissions. But unfortunately, they've only really had sort of in the tens of submissions. And I personally think that this journal, set up in the way that it is, should be getting thousands, and they would happily scale up with demand if possible.
So actually, I think so. Paula made the point that that what we need to do is develop an alternative model and uphold it and defend it as a community, which I have a lot of sympathy with that perspective. And I feel like MBDT is a really good halfway in that these are the steps that we need to take. So here you have a platform which everyone can access in terms of bioarchive, and then this scaffold on top, which is like a filter for a reader. which is one step closer to like a better way of sharing the wealth of information that we have to share with each other in the digital age.
Absolutely, yeah, I completely agree. Like, I think the core content is there. It's the preprint, and then we can add like this extra layer of evaluation and certification, which journals typically control. But we can do that through community-based systems like NBDT is. Like, it's not subservient to Elsevier or Taylor and Francis. It's controlled by the researchers themselves, and that allows us to then take back charge of the process and evolve it. You know, like we could be doing amazing things with publishing. Amazing. Like, just imagine what we could do with the internet, you know?
We can change it.
And we don't, because we're not able to evolve, test the system, test the effect of different features on the effects on the total system. Like, we could.
I'd just like to, sorry to interject, I'd just like to bring up a couple of Teal's points, because I am aware that we're running low on time as well. But sorry, first of all, he has pledged for green and platinum. Woohoo! Nice work. They're not gold, as can't justify APC, wink. But also Teal did bring up that NBDT do charge $10. So it's not technically compatible with their open access.
Yes, so that $10 is just for the DIY registration. So it's not, I don't know if I'd call it an author processing charge, but I mean, come on, yeah, $10.
Yeah, I kind of see the $10 thing as a nominal charge that I would happily pay. You know, like how Get Up say, are you happy to chip in $10 for this community-funded lawsuit? And I was like, absolutely, yes. Like, I can afford that. This is a good use. $10.
But,
Tom Johnson says maybe we should have an online telethon of people pledging.
I would love that. Let's do that.
I'm down for this.
But since we're on NBDT and the charge, as you say, Teal. So first of all, yes, like gold, I don't like author processing charges. I don't personally think is a great model. But kind of the idea of the platform is that we can put whatever campaigns we like. We can put a whole bunch of campaigns up there and just see what sticks, like see what people like. And some people will be more interested in the gold model than the platinum model. And that's okay. That's up to them. It's kind of like crowdsourcing intention for behavioral change and kind of getting a vote on what people want to do, so that we can then act on it together.
It also makes a point that $10 is nothing, but DIY Rego could be sponsored by funders and unis rather than authors. And I completely agree. And in fact, if we had libraries that weren't paying fees to Elsevier, for example, there would be plenty of $10 registration fees available.
Yeah, or
people publishing
thousands of dollars to publish in Nature Communications or whatnot. Yeah. And so then, like, I think probably what Teal's mentioning that for is because the NBDT is not technically compatible with Platinum open access charges, but that might be a fault of the campaign less so than the journal. So maybe this needs to be amended to state that DOI processing charges are okay. And that's kind of really the idea here, is that I would love to hear and collaborate with people that want to develop these campaigns into what will be most successful and have a chance of working. Because I'm sure that between us, we can set aside sort of minor differences and work on creating those general values that we all want to uphold and want to see happen. And if we can do that, then we can put it out to the crowd and hopefully it takes off.
I see two processes here. I think we need to organize and unionize our collective action so that we can, as a community, raise the value of things that we truly value that are beneficial to the scientific process. And I think we also, as a community, need to work out and develop the viable models that we can move to.
Yeah,
of which NBDT is a start.
Yeah, and it can happen in concert, I think. You know, we can build this community around this particular journal, and then that starts the discussion of what the community actually wants. We can collaborate on this. There's no reason why it needs to be someone dictating up front. You could imagine like even creating a campaign that is kind of flexible as it evolves, as the community grows. But I guess that kind of is really up to people how they want to use the platform, and if they want to describe if they can just describe the parameters of what people are pledging, and they can get people to sign it, then great, that's the idea.
So what's the next thing that like people in this conversation right now, they're fired up, what can we do? What do you want to see? Like, is it us pledging to these campaigns, or developing new campaigns, or giving feedback on your current campaigns? What can we do?
So definitely I would love for people to go to the website and just sign in with Orchid, because once you've signed in, then we've got your details and we can keep you up to speed on what's happening. In terms of individual actions, if there are campaigns there, either any of these 3 campaigns that you like the sound of and you want to support, then please absolutely pledge, because I think every person that pledges is a strong signal.
I just want to give a shout out to once the campaign for open data where possible, no more shared upon reasonable request. Yeah. Very true.
Absolutely, yeah. So open data would be a great campaign that we can create. And that then brings me to answer your question, I guess, which is what I want to do next is create these campaigns. So the platform is set up now that we can add new campaigns, and you can see this option here. Sorry, I've just lost my windows. Yeah, so you can effectively, at this stage, you still have to go manually to create these campaigns. The vision is that we create this so that you can just fill in a form and then boom, that's your campaign made. But at this stage, get in touch and we can create whatever campaign you want, and we can put it up there and we can see if it takes flight. Because as Teal mentioned, like open data is a great idea. Perhaps someone's more interested in, I mean, you could use this platform for running a study. Like, let's say you need a critical mass of researchers to provide data to a study. Or some researchers at University of Southern Queensland right now are working on a plant pathology drive. So they want to do a meta-analysis but need a certain amount of data. And so we're going to try and create a campaign that says that once you get that level of that amount of data, then the study goes ahead. And then they can all collaborate together. It just kind of enables.
So that sounds like a Kickstarter more than a collective action model there.
Well, I see them as the same, really. Like I see Kickstarter as collective action, but with a financial aspect. Whereas, say, an open data component campaign would be collective action with a data side of things.
But yeah, I feel like one is contributing something and one is behaving a certain way.
Well, Kickstarter, you're still behaving, aren't you? Because you're acting to provide money.
Yeah.
To the product to get it built. So it's still an action that you take at the point. But yeah, I take your point. Like, I think this functions more like collaction, which is this website here, and you're welcome to check out. But we are, I just realized, out of time for this morning's session. But
yeah, I think just one. So Paolo also has just brought up that quality has got to be a priority in this process, and I think I absolutely agree. And I think we as a community really need to discuss how we could maintain at least transparency on what the community values as high quality research versus not in a new world of open publishing.
Yeah. So do you mind if I just make 2 pitches and then we should wrap up? Well, 1 pitch really. So you asked like what was the next steps, and I think the next step for us as a community, as a neuroimaging community, should be to design the campaign that we could run to support that journal, Neurons, Behavior, Data and Theory, because they've done the hard work building that community of editors and reviewers, and all they need now is us to support it as a community with our submissions. So what I would love to do is, I've proposed for an Emergent session for next week sometime, is to develop a campaign where we work out what the critical mass is, like what number of people we need, what are the parameters, how many publications do we send them, that kind of thing, the nuts and bolts of what a campaign could be. And if we can come to some sort of agreement in terms on what that campaign would look like, then we can post it on the website and then put it out there for the crowd to see what they think. So that's one of the Emergent sessions. And then another Emergent session, which I'm proposing, is my own personal ideas. Like to go back to the very start of the conversation, the model that I kind of dreamed up, which I think could be a useful model for us to move forward. And it is based on what Tom and the others were saying in the chat box about using preprints, but then having an extra layer of evaluation on top of those preprints, but using the idea of kind of numerical open evaluation. So rating articles on a number of qualities of interest, like importance, novelty, replicability, transparency, rather than providing the kind of, rather than rating things pre-publication like we do currently, publish it all, rate it later, and then you've actually got this really complex, rich data set that you can use to either filter according to your needs or work out which of those ratings are actually contributing to the outcomes of interest, like impact or financial gains or whatever people are interested in. So yeah, that will be a second session. If people would like to talk about these ideas, please come along. I think it could be really exciting. I pitched
one of these sessions, I want to come. And I want to hear more from all the people who have contributed on the chat.
I'll just post a link to
really excellent.
Yeah. Because basically I'm trying to find it, that there's, obviously this is happening around the world. And so I'm trying to find a time that actually works for everybody. But it's difficult. So I've basically created a doodle poll so that people can put in their times of availability. And then hopefully I can find a time that works for most people, or possibly 2 different times that works for a couple of different sessions. So I will post that in the chat box in a second after I get this lightning talk session started.
Okay. Well, yeah, I hope everyone who's contributed to the chat attends these sessions, because I think there's a lot of good ideas here that can really be built upon.
Thank you, Kelly. And thanks everyone for being here. It's really awesome to see all the chat and comments in the crowd.